Born on August 15, 1950, at Clarence House in London, England, Princess Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise arrived with all the ceremonial flair you'd expect from a royal. The city boomed with a 21-gun salute in Hyde Park, announcing the new baby to the world. Her mother at the time was still Princess Elizabeth, heir presumptive to the throne, but the entire royal sphere already knew that Elizabeth would ascend soon enough. If Anne felt the weight of destiny from birth, it certainly never forced her to act like the meek, doll-like princess out of a children's bedtime story. Even as a little girl, she showed glimpses of that trademark no-nonsense spirit, a trait that would define her for the rest of her life. When Princess Anne was just 2 years old, her mother became Queen Elizabeth II. Practically overnight, the young Anne lost access to a traditional maternal relationship. The Queen's duties, after all, were vast and urgent. Thus, Anne spent much of her formative years in the presence of nannies, governesses, and a rotating cast of palace staff. Although this distance might have strained other parent-child bonds, Anne found ways to connect with her mother. The most enduring one? Their shared obsession with horses, where her older brother, Prince Charles, once lamented that the nursery staff were the ones who taught him to play and manage his emotions. Anne found enough common ground to form a closer relationship. As it turns out, horse girls stick together, even if one of them happens to be the Queen of England. Anne's rapport with her father, Prince Philip, was far more complicated. Known for his strict demeanor and cutting comments, Philip often belittled both Anne and Charles, either to toughen them up or simply because that was his style. For Charles, a gentle and more sensitive personality, these jabs reportedly hit hard and left lasting scars. But Anne seemed to develop a bracing resilience to her father's barbs. She rolled her eyes, shrugged off his words, and carried on. If anything, this forced her to adopt that famously blunt, borderline combative manner. After all, you can't survive Prince Philip's dinner table unless you learn to come prepared, or at least learn to armor yourself with sarcasm. In many respects, Anne's childhood reads like a bizarre social experiment. The palace, intent on making sure the new princess had some semblance of normal friendships, created a temporary local Girl Guides troupe just for her. They gathered a group of average girls to be Anne's companions. As soon as Anne left for boarding school, the group disbanded. This was no run-of-the-mill childhood, yet the princess herself seemed to take it all in stride. She'd grown accustomed to the sense that her life was always slightly staged, always choreographed. Through it all, Anne kept her eyes firmly trained on what she truly adored: riding horses and honing her equestrian skills. Equestrian pursuits, in fact, formed the core of who Princess Anne was and is. The phrase horse girl might conjure up an image of a ponytail-sporting teenager doodling pictures of galloping steeds in her school notebook. But for Anne, it was an all-consuming passion. Prince Philip once famously quipped, "If it doesn't fart or eat hay, she isn't interested." That pithy remark captured Anne's ethos perfectly. While her peers might have been fussing over dresses, balls, jewels, and paparazzi, Anne was out in the stables or on the riding grounds. Growing up, she bonded with her brother Charles by helping him overcome his fear of jumping fences and teaching him to ride more confidently. She seemed fearless in the saddle, and fearless in personality. This passion eventually shaped not only her personal identity, but also her romantic life. In 1968, she met Mark Phillips at a party for horse enthusiasts, and the chemistry was instant. Phillips was himself a skilled rider, admired in British equestrian circles. He was tall, good-looking, and, of course, just as besotted with horses as Anne was. Yet, behind this budding love story, another far juicier chapter in Anne's romantic history, was playing out, or had just played out, and it involved some scandalous cross-connections with her brother, Prince Charles. Before Anne's courtship with Phillips, she had been involved with a man named Andrew Parker Bowles. Andrew had recently broken up with his on-again, off-again sweetheart, Camilla Shand, who is now recognized as Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall. Royal insiders whispered that Andrew cheated on Camilla with Anne, or at the very least, the timelines overlapped uncomfortably. Scandalous enough, perhaps, but it got even more twisted when Camilla then turned around and began courting Prince Charles. Yes, that Prince Charles. If that doesn't raise eyebrows, consider that Anne and Charles, two siblings, were romantically involved, albeit separately, with two people who had also been dating one another. While it's not actually incest, the entire situation had a whiff of the bizarre, a sense that the young royals were playing an oddly intimate game of musical chairs. Eventually, Camilla and Andrew reunited, leaving Anne and Charles out in the cold. But even that fiasco didn't dissuade Anne from forging ahead with her own rebellious brand of love stories. The next big development in the princess's life was a triumph she actually won on her own merits. In 1971, at just 21 years old, Anne clinched the gold medal at the European Eventing Championships, a major riding competition that tests a rider's skill and bravery across multiple equestrian disciplines. The victory wasn't just a feather in her cap. It positioned her as a legitimate athlete, not merely a hobbyist. Even if she hadn't been a princess, she might well have been a star on the equestrian circuit. 2 years after that gold medal performance, Anne embarked on what seemed at the time to be a fairy tale beginning. On November 14, 1973, coincidentally, Prince Charles's 25th birthday, she married Mark Phillips at Westminster Abbey. The wedding was an event brimming with pageantry, carriage rides through London, exuberant crowds, and a special bank holiday designated just for the occasion. Yet Anne's personal style was already on display for the wedding. Where some princesses might have chosen a frothy, highly embellished gown, Anne opted for a Tudor-style creation with a high collar that exuded regality and a modern beehive hairdo that nodded to contemporary fashion. Even the wedding cake featured a unique topper, a female jockey leaping over a fence, rather than a traditional bride and groom figurine. The message was clear. This was no docile royal bride, but a woman who set her own course and refused to be pinned down by expectations. The union of Anne and Mark Phillips was, however, far from standard. Mark decided against any royal titles, so their children, Peter and Zara, grew up without courtesy titles. Though they lived in a bubble of wealth and privilege, it was a slightly different bubble than, say, the one Prince Charles's children inhabited. And if that detail seems minor, it speaks volumes about Anne's unique approach to tradition. She followed protocol in many respects, yet bent it or disregarded it in others, all without batting an eyelash. Still, rumors began to swirl that there was more complexity hidden beneath the glitter. According to palace insiders, the couple's marriage was often strained. They spent little time together, presumably because Mark was frequently away at equestrian or military events, and Anne filled her days with either her own engagements or official royal duties. As whispers grew, the tabloids ran speculative pieces about whether the princess was heading for a divorce. For a time, Anne and her circle vehemently denied any trouble, but the cracks in the relationship were becoming harder and harder to ignore. Before that tension could boil over completely, Princess Anne found herself in the middle of a real-life horror story. On March 20th, 1974, just a few months after her wedding, Anne and Mark were returning to Buckingham Palace when a Ford Escort cut them off on the Mall. The driver, Ian Ball, jumped out and began shooting, injuring Anne's chauffeur, her bodyguard, and even a journalist who rushed in to see what was happening. Ball then tried to force Anne out of the car, possibly with the intention of kidnapping her for ransom. This was a moment of chilling high drama, and yet it also revealed Anne's famously unflappable nature. When Ball demanded that Anne step out, she reportedly responded, "Not bloody likely," a line so bold it instantly became legend. Mark Phillips tried to hold on to Anne's waist to keep her from being dragged out. In the struggle, her dress was torn. The scene must have been utter chaos. Bullets fired, confusion in the night air, a frantic attacker demanding millions of pounds in ransom, and a princess who just said no. A passerby, a former boxer named Ronald Russell, intervened. At first, he thought it was a nasty road rage incident. He had no clue the people involved were a deranged gunman and a British princess. Regardless, Russell delivered a punch that knocked the assailant off balance, which allowed Anne to scramble free. The authorities then closed in, disarmed Ball, and uncovered a ransom note in his car that demanded up to £3 million from the Queen. He had planned to distribute the money to the National Health Service, in what appears to have been a convoluted attempt at vigilante justice. Thankfully, no one lost their life that night, but the trauma was real, and the princess's stoic reaction made headlines. Her refusal to comply with the kidnapper, her calm in the face of bullets, these aspects solidified her reputation as a no-nonsense, steel-spined royal who wasn't about to let palace security, or lack thereof, define her fate. In the midst of this upheaval, Princess Anne continued to pursue equestrian greatness. In 1976, she became the first member of the British royal family to compete in the Olympic Games, representing Great Britain in the 3-day eventing team at Montreal. Though she didn't win a medal, the fact that she qualified at all spoke volumes about her commitment and skill. She wasn't just dabbling for show, she was competing at a world-class level. Meanwhile, her personal life kept generating gossip. In 1979, the rumor mill had a field day when stories circulated that Anne might be having an affair with her personal bodyguard, Sergeant Peter Cross. The palace abruptly fired Cross, which only fueled speculation. Years later, Cross claimed to a British tabloid that he and Anne had indeed been involved, though, by that point, few people were truly surprised. The press had already begun spinning tales of a discontented marriage with Mark Phillips, and another scandal involving private letters would soon overshadow everything. By the late 1980s, the tabloids had a brand new bombshell. This time, someone stole correspondence belonging to Timothy Lawrence, a senior attendant of Queen Elizabeth II. The letters were from Princess Anne. The nature of these letters was never officially published, but the rumors were damning. Anne was allegedly carrying on an extramarital relationship with Timothy Lawrence. Given that Anne and Mark Phillips's marriage looked shaky, the media treated the private letters as proof that the couple was all but finished. In 1989, Anne and Mark officially announced their separation. All the while, Anne was busy racking up an enormous amount of royal duties. She developed a reputation for a tireless work ethic. Some might even say she was the hardest-working member of the royal family. Dignitaries joked that she demanded full schedules, full diaries, full days. She rarely paused for small talk or even polite banter. She arrived, performed her duty, and left. That approach, combined with her famously curt sense of humor, earned her a less flattering nickname in the tabloids, her royal rudeness. She refused to pose for informal photographs, declined to shake hands with well-wishers, a policy that certain royals later adopted themselves to keep things orderly, and generally seemed to find public niceties tedious. In 1990, Anne earned another first for the monarchy when she traveled to the Soviet Union during the tumultuous era of Mikhail Gorbachev. It was a groundbreaking diplomatic moment, setting the stage for subsequent visits by other royals. She also made an unusual cameo in popular culture by appearing on a BBC panel show, A Question of Sport, the very first British royal to do something that informal. All these feats underscored her blend of tradition-breaking irreverence and unwavering dedication to the crown. Then, in 1992, the unraveling marriage with Mark reached its inevitable conclusion. The couple divorced. Months later, yes, just a few months, Anne married Timothy Lawrence in Scotland, because the Church of England refused to let divorced individuals remarry if their former spouses were still alive. The hurried timeline, combined with the scandal of the stolen letters, raised eyebrows, but by then, nobody who followed Anne's trajectory could feign shock. She had done what she always did, taken a path that was simultaneously taboo for royals and entirely fitting for her personal convictions. Being married twice also placed her in a historically daring position. She was the first British royal to divorce and remarry since the early 20th century, specifically since Princess Victoria Melita, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, did so in 1905. For a monarchy that prided itself on continuity and tradition, Anne's decision felt radical, though in her no-nonsense style, she treated it as matter of fact. She became Anne Princess Royal, a title historically bestowed upon the monarch's eldest daughter, in 1987, and, as if to highlight her boundary-pushing attitude, she insisted on being inducted as a knight rather than a lady in the Order of the Garter in 1994. She wanted the same recognition that her male counterparts had. Meanwhile, more drama brewed within the extended royal family. Anne never hid her conflicting feelings about Princess Diana. Though the press usually portrayed Diana as sweet and photogenic, insiders whispered that Anne once referred to Diana behind her back as the dope. Some suggested the animosity stemmed from their vastly different approaches to royal life. Diana was emotional, media-savvy, and glamorous, whereas Anne was brusque, insisted on privacy, and had little use for the press. Although they were sisters-in-law, they never seemed particularly close. Later, Anne met Tony Blair's wife, Cherie, and when Cherie casually suggested that Anne could call her by her first name, Anne reputedly responded, "Actually, let's not go that way. Let's stick to Mrs. Blair, shall we?" That's Princess Anne in a nutshell. Straight-talking, unimpressed, and not remotely concerned with a stranger's self-esteem. Even the arrival of Prince George, the future king, didn't elicit a warm gush of grandmotherly or grandauntly sentiments from Anne. When a journalist asked her about the birth, Anne let out a curt reply, "Well, it's nothing to do with me." By that point, the media and public had grown accustomed to these sorts of withering one-liners. She'd spent decades rolling her eyes at small talk and half-hearted flattery. Despite this unapproachable exterior, there have been glimpses of a more empathetic Anne. Her friendship with Andrew Parker Bowles, yes, the man with whom she'd had that earlier romance, endured for decades. She was present at the funeral of his second wife, Rosemary, in 2010, quietly offering support, and in official engagements, especially those related to her charity work, Anne can exhibit genuine warmth toward the causes she cares about, including Save the Children. She's served as its president for many years. Those close to her say that once she deems a person or a cause worthy, she pours her energy into it wholeheartedly. It's just that she doesn't dole out graciousness to every random passerby. Even in legal affairs, Anne has managed to carve out a singular infamy. She's the first royal in modern times to have a criminal record. In 2001, authorities fined her £400 for speeding, a minor but embarrassing blow. The very next year, she found herself in even deeper trouble when her English bull terrier, Dottie, allegedly attacked 2 children in Windsor Great Park. This time, the authorities fined her £500, and she had to pay compensation. Royal watchers were stunned. The monarchy was used to controlling or spinning controversies involving personal conduct, But there was no easy spin for that. Anne simply accepted the fines and presumably told everyone to move on. Perhaps the most viral moment in recent memory that brought Anne's unfiltered style to the public eye was a clip from December 2019 when the Queen was receiving guests, among them the President of the United States, and cameras caught Anne shrugging exaggeratedly, apparently in defiance. The internet hailed her as a meme-worthy rebel. In reality, the footage in context told a less rebellious story. The Queen had looked at Anne to see who else was in line for the greetings, and Anne had playfully shrugged, joking, "It's just me," as if to say there was no one else to introduce. Nonetheless, the story ballooned into Princess Anne refuses to greet the president, which many people found delightfully consistent with her persona. Even if it was a misunderstanding, it encapsulated the world's perception of her. She's the princess who stands apart from the pack, does her own thing, and can't be bothered with ceremonial niceties unless she absolutely has to. For all the jokes about her rudeness, Anne is also recognized as one of the most relentlessly dedicated members of the royal family in terms of charitable and ceremonial work. In 2017, official records showed she had undertaken the most engagements of any royal that year, beating even her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and her older brother, Prince Charles. This pattern continued through many years. Royal watchers often comment on the disparity between her high volume of work and the lower amount of media coverage she receives. It's as though she toils diligently behind the scenes, even traveling on behalf of the crown more than her siblings, yet gets overshadowed by the more glamorous or scandal-plagued members of her family. But that might just be the way Anne prefers it. She rarely complains about the paparazzi, because she rarely courts them in the first place. She might just prefer a quieter brand of influence. That brand of influence extends to her status as Princess Royal, a title reserved for the eldest daughter of the monarch. Historically, that title is not automatically granted. It's an honor that can be bestowed. The tradition dates back to 1642, when Queen Henrietta Maria, wife of King Charles III, wanted to mimic the French styling of Madame Royale for her own daughter. Since then, there's often only one Princess Royal in each era, meaning Anne, as Queen Elizabeth II's eldest and only daughter, took on that mantle. Not content to simply rest on the name's laurels, Anne injected her own unique vigor into every official duty that came with it. Throughout the 2000s, Anne continued to confound expectations. She never tried to cultivate a glamorous image like Diana, nor did she move to modernize the monarchy in the same ways Charles or younger royals might. Instead, she stuck to her guns, literally and figuratively. She has never allowed the media to see her in any light other than the one she chooses to present. At events, she continues to brandish that sharp wit, sometimes at the expense of unlucky individuals who cross her path with ill-prepared small talk. But ironically, her approach has endeared her to a segment of royal fans who appreciate a person that doesn't clamor for attention or try to spin a perfect narrative. She's stayed largely out of the tabloid crosshairs since her marriage to Timothy Lawrence. That relationship appears to have significantly less drama than her first. At official events, one can occasionally see their subtle but genuine rapport. They stand near each other, exchange small smiles, then go on with their duties. It's not the stuff of tabloid fairy tales, but it seems to work splendidly for them. Timothy Lawrence, for his part, remains a relatively private figure, overshadowed by the flamboyance of the monarchy. With him, Anne can presumably enjoy some measure of normalcy that might have eluded her in the more public and complicated chapters of her life. That's not to say Anne has renounced her rebellious streak. Even in small moments, it shines through. She once startled a reporter who asked about her favorite meal by replying that she loved fish and chips. Sure, that might sound ordinary, but it's a small window into the mind of someone who doesn't feel compelled to present an aristocratic facade. Another tidbit, she apparently has a fondness for martinis as her nightcap. The so-called no-frills princess still likes to wind down with a stiff drink, just like any number of busy professionals at the end of a taxing day. In the end, we're left with a portrait of a woman who, despite being born into opulence and near limitless privilege, insisted on finding her own boundaries and pushing them whenever necessary. Even the route she took to love, marriage, and motherhood was paved with controversies and abrupt pivots, and yet it led her to a place of relative stability and quiet contentment. That spirit has earned her the respect of many and the confusion of countless others who can't quite reconcile how a princess can be so decidedly unprincessy at times. But that's exactly the allure. She's the hidden royal, not because she lurks in the shadows, but because she's often overshadowed by more camera-friendly personalities or overshadowed by the legacy of her mother, Elizabeth II. Digging into Anne's life reveals a trove of enthralling details and moments that could captivate any audience looking for something beyond the neatly curated, pastel-tinted illusions of monarchy. Princess Anne stands in the thick of it all, sometimes overshadowed, sometimes shining as a surprising star, but always, always in her own words and on her own terms. If you've ever wondered whether real-life princesses could be tough, sardonic, fearless, loyal, messy, blunt, and unbreakably focused all at once, look no further than Anne. Hers is a story of refusing to fit the mold, even while wearing the crown's insignia. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the truest iconoclast can be found right at the heart of the establishment. And that is precisely what makes Princess Anne's life so irresistibly intriguing, and, dare we say it, rather regal in its own brash, unique way.